pain is what teaches me lessons. And I've said I'm going to do things and then betrayed myself and then suffered the consequences of that so many times that I've learned that when I say I'm going to do something, even if it sucks to complete the thing that I said I was going to do, that feels better than the pain of betraying myself. And when you do betray yourself, it's amazing how that lack of trust that you feel in yourself kind of ripples out into your life, and you trust people less, and they trust you less, and less opportunities come your way. But it's much easier to just give yourself an excuse and move on, and not look at that deep, dark part of yourself that just wanted to quit because it was hard, and just wanted to quit because I failed before and it felt bad, and I don't like feeling bad. It's much easier to just kind of ignore that, watch Netflix, eat ice cream, drink alcohol, and move on. But if you can listen to that little voice inside that goes, no, you should keep going, you're just quitting because it sucks right now. Watch your life change, and watch it change like magically in a relatively short period of time.
A leader has to take the risks.
The man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Matt Enns. What's up, dude?
Not very much. How are you doing?
So let me just make sure I'm getting your last name right. Is it Matt Enns?
Enns, yeah.
Enns. Okay. All right. So I threw that little I in there. So
most people do.
All right. That's okay. So maybe we're just used to it or something, that sure. we're our eyes are deceiving us, So yeah, Mr. Matt, what's up, dude? How are you, man? What part of the world are you in now?
I am in Texas. So we were here for a couple of years. Then we were in Ottawa, Canada, working on visa issues in Europe. And then we finally made it back just over a month ago.
So you are originally from where?
From Canada, from Ottawa in Canada.
From Canada. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So is that hard to immigrate from Canada to the United States?
Yeah. So technically it's not immigration, or no, because we're non-immigrant. I don't even know, but we have a visa. Okay. So we're allowed to be here for 5 to 7 years.
Okay. And all right.
It is quite hard. Yeah. The visa that we applied for is fairly straightforward, but even still, it was a mess and it took years. And I'm happy to be here. I'll put it that way.
You're happy to be where you're
Texas.
at in Texas, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It was a trip getting here for sure.
Well, I mean, at least Texas might not freeze your bank account during any Correct. Sort of uprising. Any sort of major event. They're probably not gonna mess with your bank account like Canada. For some reason, they think they could freeze bank accounts now, huh?
Yeah, Scotiabank was the worst in Canada for that, and it's absolutely despicable. It's completely illegal, but such is what Canada has become. But there's a major backlash going on in Canada right now. Canada is going to be electing the Conservative Party, and the leader of the Conservative Party is a friend of mine. Actually, I know him quite well.
Wow.
And he's a good guy. And so they're going to win in a historic landslide that hasn't been seen ever in the history of conservative politics. So it got bad enough in Canada that Canadians actually woke up.
Wow.
I don't think that's happened in the States quite yet, but who knows?
Well, I have a lot of friends in Canada, and I've been to Canada many times, and I love the people. People of Canada are freaking amazing, man. I mean, they probably say sorry too much, but they're always saying sorry. But other than saying sorry all the time, they are like the most amazing people in the world. And so I was shocked when I saw so many politicians, man. They just, and it's Trudeau, right? I mean, Trudeau's the guy that basically, now, is it true that he is the son of the Cuban? I mean, is that found to be true, or is it just like a unfounded thing?
Growing up in Ottawa, by the way, are we rolling here? Is this a podcast, or are we just chatting?
We're rolling, and we'll put in whatever we want to put in. Perfect. So we're good, man.
So it's funny. Growing up in Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, I saw a lot of like insider politics. I've worked in politics for a while. I've worked with politicians in a professional capacity. So you hear which rumors are true and which are not. And so that one I've never heard if it's true, because how do you know if that's true? But a lot of the other rumors about Mr. Justin Trudeau are true. And
what are some of the other things that maybe we don't know about him that maybe somebody from Canada would know about them?
He swings both ways.
Wow. Okay. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
So again, who knows, right? But people who would know have told me that that is very much the case. So again, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But people
Well,
that would know have told me.
it's kind of amazing. I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, how sad from an American standpoint. Like, look, people that are from the LGBTQ community, I have zero problem with those people. Matter of fact, I have some really good friends that are gay and lesbian. I mean, they're just, and some of the nicest freaking people you'll ever meet in your life are gay and lesbian. So let's just be honest. I mean, there's
good and bad people in every single group you can imagine. I don't think the group has very much to do with
100%. Like but what pains me is that when you have the LGBTQ flag being flown on the White House as transgender and all these crazy people are running across the lawn, exposing their breasts and doing all these things. I mean, this is all documented stuff. I mean, this happened. And where's the outrage, man? I mean, like, why are people not completely appalled by this type of behavior, presidential feeling? Like, this is our White House, for God's sakes, right?
Yeah. And one of the primary functions of a flag is to demarcate territory, right? So when you think about it that way, it's a whole different angle. And again, as the good point you made earlier, speaking of the activist movement, not the individuals that it claims to speak for, right? Because I know many people who are part of that community who certainly don't consider themselves part of that that movement. But I had a thought and now it's disappeared.
I just think we're the world is like, something's happening right now. I mean, we were both at Tucker Carlson the other night, right, a couple of weeks ago, and you've been traveling across the nation with Tucker, and hopefully we'll get into that a little bit. But I'll tell you, man, I mean, the world, there's so many crazy things happening right now. It's so sad. I mean, especially Tucker was talking about how he was from Southern California. I mean, and he's just going, it doesn't look the same that it was when I was a kid. And to me, I love California. I mean, I'm a native Californian and I've lived here all my life. I love California. I just feel very sad that we've taken the greatest weather in the world. We've taken the greatest, some of the greatest beaches in the world. We've taken some of the greatest economic successes in the world, and we're just crapping on them.
Yeah. And I found my thought from before, which is relevant to this too. I think, kind of underlying all of this is a weak population, right? And politics, in my mind, is always downstream of culture. And when you have a culture that's been trained out of having any beliefs, and their minds have been so degraded that a large segment of the population can look you dead in the face and say, men and women don't exist. There's no such thing as a man or a woman. It's simply how you identify. When the fundamental differentiations and definitions that we use to categorize the world around us have been degraded to such a point where even something as fundamental as male and female no longer exists, there's no part of you that can say, no, I can recognize when things are right and wrong. I recognize good and evil. I can differentiate good and evil, because that part of your ability to, that divine discernment, our ability to judge with love and with integrity and with clarity, it's been eliminated consciously. And so the population has no expectations, right? We don't demand integrity from our politicians. And when a politician with integrity does show up, like RFK, for example, and policy-wise, I would be less aligned with him on many things than some other people, but that's a man of incredible integrity. And no one cares. I mean, people do, right? But it's a very small percentage of the population. And what we think is integrity is people who say nice things, right? Justin Trudeau. And if you say nice things, that's really the only expectation we have. We don't care if you actually do the things you say you're going to do. We don't care if you have results that improve people's lives. We don't care if you keep us safe. We don't care if the cities are covered in human feces and needles and there's crime everywhere, and 911, you get an answering machine and they maybe call you back or maybe not. None of that seems to matter to enough of the population that we actually expect our politicians to make changes for us. And so I'm still involved politically with individuals that are in the political process, but I exited myself from the political process because I don't think that's where change is going to take place. And that's part of why I work with men. And I don't know of the, hundreds of men in our coaching program. I don't know how 99.9% of them are planning on voting because it's not what we talk about. But if I can help them heal themselves, become strength, learn how to love fully, that's where I think the solution to all of this comes. Because right now, people with no vision, no direction, no sense of their own integrity, no trust in themselves, no respect for themselves, that's what leads to all these societal problems that we're seeing right now.
Wow, that's powerful, man. Well said.
Thank you.
This is why though, and I want you to give your thoughts on this. This is why the political system is emasculating men. Would you agree?
100%. The greatest threat to tyranny is always men, and specifically young men. And Andrew Tate, who I don't really like, I love a lot of what he says, and I have the same sense of humor as him. So none of that stuff bothers me. I find all of his off-color jokes hilarious. I don't like a lot of his advice on women and relationships because my job is to help people have long-term fulfilling monogamous relationships. So you can see where we're pretty obviously misaligned. But that's why he's being attacked so much, is he's creating strong young men. And there is absolutely an attack on the very idea of men, the very idea of masculinity. And I don't think any of our societal problems are going to get solved until individual men wake up, start getting their own shit together, start getting their act in the family together, start creating healthier children, healthier homes, healthier neighborhoods, healthier states, healthier nations. But everything. Well, one of the things that Tucker said in the intro at one of his events was, we don't need to know these people's motivations. We can just look at the results of their policies and we can infer the motivation. And the results for decades in a row is to disempower men, to emasculate them, to tell them that they're toxic, to tell them that they're powerless. And again, my personal concern is not how people vote. If people wake up and find their own sense of integrity, find their own sense of purpose, learn to live from a place of strength and freedom and love, whatever they do is going to make the world a better, richer, more beautiful place. But that idea of a strong, loving man is almost anathema to what we see in popular media and in politics and everywhere else. So it's an uphill battle.
Well, it's pretty apparent right now because you can see a dividing line in the sand that the two political, at least in America, the two political parties are, standing for, right? One side is standing for certain ideals, and the other side is standing for certain ideals, and it's a little bit it's a little bit of a crazy time right now because you kind of think, if we don't start having people rise up and becoming strong in their convictions, men and women being strong in their convictions to say, wait a minute, we're not standing for this anymore. Kind of like what maybe Canada is doing right now. America is in trouble. This next election, I think, yeah, you're right. I think long term, as long as we have strong men and women, or, at least, I know you work a lot with men, but if we have people to be able to stand up for strong values and beliefs that are good, that come from good, that come from a good place where people want to make good choices, want to build a strong family, want to make sure their family is safe and protected. If we have that, of course, the world is going to be a better place. And so what's the, as far as like, if you were to think about, because especially you came from the political scene, what is the motivation? Like, why would, like, what boggles my mind, and again, this is why I want to get your take on it, because I just can't wrap my head around it, like a Gavin Newsom that runs California. What's his motivation? Like, why does he want to hurt California? Because that's exactly what he's doing. But what's the motivation behind it?
Yeah, let me give you a bit of a long answer. So part of my coaching method, although it's focused on saving relationships for men who are at some stage in the divorce process or their wife wants to leave them, that is really just an excuse for me to do what I really love, which is working with men, helping them figure out their own internal issues, work through trauma in the past, work through anger, anxiety, people pleasing, whatever it might be. And so I have spent an enormous amount of time studying myself, working with these men. And understanding their motivations and why we do the things that we do. That's the world that I live in. That's my greatest passion in life. That's, I believe, my gift to the world. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I've had the fortune or disfortune of knowing many of these politicians who are, you know, what I would consider good or what I would consider bad in terms of what they're doing. And my opinion on people like that is they are so unconcerned with their own internal self-respect, their own internal self-approval, and they're exclusively concerned with the applause of the people around them. And so when your own internal identity is entirely decided by other people's perspective of you, you tend to gravitate towards the people that make you feel good about yourself, the people that offer meaningless, fake, superficial, but easily accessible praise. And when that's what you're seeking, you get pulled very quickly away from doing what you believe is right. And that happens enough times in a row, and you get to a place where what's right doesn't really factor into it anymore. But that desire for applause, that desire for the approval of the crowd, as it grows, there's something corrosive and something toxic about it, and it pulls you away from your real self, your deeper self, your higher self, your soul, whatever you want to call it. And you're drawn to the applause of the crowd because you need approval, because you don't feel like you're good enough, because you feel like if I can get the applause of the crowd, then I'll feel good. So there's this self-hatred going on. There's issues of insecurity and self-worth. And when you have self-hatred, inevitably part of you expresses that. And if you're not willing to recognize that it's against yourself, you'll project it onto other people, right? And so I think when all of these policies result in mass impoverishment, in mass crime, in the lowering of living standards and making everything more expensive and making it harder for regular people to get through their day, and no part of you goes, maybe the policies that I'm doing are part of why everything is getting worse, that's because part of you hates those people. And again, it's an extension of that self-hatred that you're hiding, that you're unwilling to acknowledge, right? And whatever you're unwilling to acknowledge inside of you, you see outside of you. And that's your subconscious mind trying to get you to see what's inside of you, right? So the world is a mirror. It's the you inverse as much as it is the universe. And so I really do believe that they're motivated in large part by a hatred of humanity. And, you know, if people have a tough time grasping that, or they think that sounds radical, look at communism anywhere it's been attempted in the world. And it's been attempted in many different societies at many different points over the last 150-ish years. Literally, we've had two countries cut in half. One half is capitalist, one half is communist, you know, East and West Germany,
right,
North
right.
and South Korea. And you see what happens, right? On one side, there's largely freedom, there's unity, there's community and connection. And on the other side, there's torture, mass starvation, death, prison camps. And is that a coincidence where these wonderful people who just want everyone to be equal, where it always ends in mass starvation, mass murder, mass torture? Or do we just turn on our brains for 30 seconds and go, oh, there's probably a link between those two things? And I think we're seeing the exact same thing play out across the West, but it's just much less extreme so far than communism. But I think it's driven by the same thing, which is a hatred of other people, which is a reflection of a hatred of oneself.
I think what it comes down to is it always comes down to leadership, you know, leadership in our government, the right people in the right spots in our government. I mean, I'm thrilled that JFK decided to, or RFK decided to get involved with Trump because, you know, it brought together two different set of ideas. And it proved to everybody that, look, I mean, you don't have to agree on everything. None of us are going to agree on every single thing in our life. We're never going to get, I mean, and we're going to talk a lot about marriages and relationships and stuff like that, because, I mean, and same thing goes in a relationship, right? I mean, you're never going to have this perfect partner that's going to do everything right 100% of the time. And just like in politics, no leader or politician is going to do everything that you want perfectly every time. But you really have to, at some point, you got to look at the leadership and you got to say, who is best suited for this situation? That's the way I vote. And I've told people for years, I mean, I'm a Republican, but I've told people for years, if a Democrat came out and was better suited and made better choices and better ideas and better whatever for America, I'm the first one to vote for a Democrat. It has to do with the leadership of the man. And so kind of segueing into relationships, I mean, how does that, the leadership of the home, how does that play into all this?
Yeah, well, that's again, part of my mission is I want to wake up as many men as I can so that they can live from a place of strength and freedom. And when you do that and you have a strong sense of internal integrity, you recognize good men and great men when you see them, right? And RFK, as much as I might disagree with some of his policies, I recognize like that's a good man. And I would far rather have a man of integrity who I disagreed with his policies in place than a man who I agree with all of his policies, but I don't trust his integrity. And what's happening right now with Elon Musk, RFK, Vivek, Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, like these people all have radically different policies, but I think they all very much have a deep sense of integrity, and it's beautiful to see. And there's a principle, as above, so below. If something's true on a cellular level, it's true on a cosmic level. If something's true on an individual level, it's true on a societal level. And I think those same principles are true in the home. And when you have a man in the home, the father, the husband, who is not right within himself, the house is not going to be right, right? If the king is not right, the kingdom is not right. And if the king heals, the kingdom heals. And so when you can step in as the man and say, okay, things are not the way I want them to be in my family. My wife is not treating me the way that I want her to treat me. And I'm going to use some common examples out of here. My wife is not behaving in public the way that I would want her to. It's embarrassing. She doesn't treat me with respect. She does things that I think make our family look bad. I don't like the way that my kids are acting. I don't like the part of town we live in. I don't like how clean our home is. It's very easy to externalize all these things, right? But again, if there's things around you that you don't like or that are bothering you or that are triggering you in some way, it's always because there's some part of you that has that same issue that you're not willing to look at. So if your house is not clean, what inside of you is not clean? If your wife is embarrassing in public, what about yourself are you ashamed of? If your wife doesn't treat you with respect, what about yourself do you not respect? Because if I was to, come up to you and say, like, insult you, say you're a banana, like no part of you would be bothered, right? But depending on what kind of insecurities you have, if I say you're not a man, if I say you're weak, if I say you're insecure, like that might bother you because there's some little part of you that maybe says, okay, that's true, right? And so the only things that bother us are things that resonate inside of us somewhere. And so rather than saying my wife needs to change for the relationship to improve, my neighborhood needs to change for my home to improve, can you just start improving yourself and changing the things that you can change inside of you? And what I've seen over and over and over again is that if the man gets himself in a good place, deals with his internal issues, creates a vision, develops discipline, knows how to be loving, knows how to be patient, knows how to withstand his wife's emotional storms without joining her in that emotional storm. He can offer, stability and calm in the midst of her storm instead of jumping into it with her because he's insecure or defensive or wants to convince her she's wrong or thinks she's factually inaccurate. When he can stop that and just be a source of love and strength for the home, all of a sudden, all those behaviors that he didn't like about his wife start to kind of disappear. And she starts to join him on this journey of love and strength. His kids' behavior begins to change. The nervous systems of everybody in the house begin to regulate. All of a sudden, it's cleaner. All of a sudden, you don't feel like the neighborhood is so bad anymore because it turns out it wasn't the neighborhood. It was the fact that you didn't mow your lawn and you're ashamed that the neighbors always noticed, right? So many of these things are internal issues. And when you fix those internal issues, it's amazing how the external world fixes itself in response.
So where did you, tell me a little bit about your journey, man. Where did you come up with all this stuff and how did you get so much of this wisdom? Because I love listening to you. I'm like one of your biggest fans on Instagram. And the reason why is because you have so much wisdom. Where did it come from? Tell me a little bit about your childhood. What did your parents do? Did you grow up? Give me a little bit of the backstory of where you came from and how you came to these realizations. Because I know you went through some challenges in your marriage.
Yeah, for sure. Whatever small amount of wisdom that I do have comes exclusively through pain and being curious about my pain. So it's hard. You can pick any point in time to start the story because you could trace it back to parents, grandparents, whatever. But most directly, in my late teens, I really started developing social anxiety. And one of the ways I addressed that was alcohol. And so I started, getting drunk 4, 5, 6 nights a week when I was 15, 16, 17. And it kind of escalated to the point where, there were many years in my 20s where I didn't take a single day off. And I don't mean a day off from drinking 1 or 2 beers. I mean a day off from getting drunk. And so for about 15 years, I was drunk after a certain time of the night every single day. And my life was kind of falling apart, and my marriage was really falling apart. And the way I looked at it then, it was my wife's fault. She was a bitch. She didn't listen. She didn't appreciate what I was doing. She didn't do her part. It was my family's fault. It was my finances' fault. It was my competitors and business's fault. Nothing was my fault. And I tried so many things to address, because the social anxiety got to the point where, I could be on the phone with my, then girlfriend, later wife, and like lose my voice on the phone because I was so nervous. Being at a party, if somebody asked me a question in front of more than one person, I had to answer, it was very, very difficult for me. Racing heart, adrenaline, really, really like torturous existence, really, part of why I drank so much. And I tried every kind of therapy and everything you can imagine, and none of it worked, none of it worked, none of it worked. And I came across a Jordan Peterson video, and it said, if you have any memories that are older than 18 months that you still have an emotional reaction to, that's because there's lessons to be learned there that you haven't yet learned. And
Beautiful.
I thought,
Beautiful.
well,
Beautiful.
every single memory that I have, if I think about it, I get a racing heart and I get that tight feeling in my chest. And so I'd spent my whole life just not thinking about things and pushing them away. That was how I learned to cope. And at this time, I was a lifelong insomniac, thankfully not so much anymore. And so I was taking like really high doses of edible marijuana to help me fall asleep. And when you're on, 30, 40, 50 milligrams for 50 grams, whatever it is, of edible indica cannabis, and you ask yourself, why does this memory bother me? Like, you're gonna get an answer, and you're not going to be able to escape that answer. So I spent about 18 months doing 1 or 2 or 3 hours a day of just going through every single memory that I could possibly find. And it was very like destabilizing psychologically. I kind of lost my personality. I lost all of my coping mechanisms. I lost all of the ways I navigated through the world because they were all full of shit. I realized that everything I did was, like we were talking about earlier, trying to get approval from people, trying to make them think I was smart or cool or wealthy or whatever I was trying to make them think. There was none of me in me. It was all fake. And so by the time I went through that process of getting rid of all the bullshit, there was like nothing left. So it's not something I recommend people do because it took me years to rebuild myself. And luckily I have processes for my clients to do this in a healthy way now. But that really deep understanding I got from basically excavating every moment of my life that I could remember and trying to learn, like, what was my role in how bad things got and what did I do wrong? And when a stranger walked up and slapped me in the street, what was my role in creating that situation? And the more I asked that, the more I understood how I operated, the more I understood how other people operated, the more I understood why my relationship was falling apart. And then that's what kind of allowed me to start rebuilding myself, and then eventually creating this coaching program. There's a lot more to it, family stuff, books I read, podcasts, thousands and thousands of them. But that's kind of the Cliff's Notes.
I mean, can you imagine, Matt? I mean, if people actually started to do that. I mean, just in what you just said right now, imagine if people, when they had a bad situation, when they had something happen to them, if they actually thought about it and said, well, what was my role to play? Where did I go wrong? What did I maybe do that caused this situation? Is that kind of what you're saying here?
100%. Yeah. And we actually have our sales team screen out the people who aren't willing to look at themselves that way, because in the past, I've worked with people who have that victim mindset, and you can break the victim mindset, and I'm relatively good at it. But if you can't break the victim mindset, there's nothing you can do to improve people. But when you do that, and I've developed these methods where rather than having to go over every single memory in your entire life, you can kind of find the key archetypal memories that represent 1,000 other different memories where you learned the same lesson. But if you can just reinterpret your understanding of that one event, heal your emotional response to that one event, you can kind of move forward pretty quickly. And so that's what I do. So I don't have to so much imagine what that's like, because I've done this with many, many men, hundreds of men. And that's why, I really am starting to believe in a lot of woo-woo ideas, because I'm seeing, this guy heals himself, and instead of approaching his relationship with anger or anxiety, he's able to approach it with love and with strength. And the wives turn around in 48 hours. The kids get happier. He gets a promotion. He starts making more money. Like all these things where it's like the statistical likelihood of all of that happening right after this happens hundreds of times with hundreds of different men. It's very unlikely. And that's why, you see things in movies that are preposterous, but you don't really think so when you're watching the movies. Like, oh, this kind of makes sense. And you think of the scene that we've all seen in The Lion King, where when Simba comes back, defeats Scar, all of a sudden, the clouds part, the rain stops, the green comes back, and everything gets better, right? And it's like,
Right.
when the king is right, the kingdom is right. When the king heals, the kingdom heals. And it is magical with a capital M how that happens. So we have so much power to heal ourselves and change the people around us and change our environment. But if you try to change the people around you, if you try to change your environment, I haven't seen people have much success doing that.
Biggest reason that you see why relationships don't work, why marriages don't work?
We think men and women are the same. And then we go to a couples therapist who thinks men and women are the same and gives you both identical advice. And men and women need radically different advice to make a relationship work. We've all heard men and women are from, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, men want respect, women want love. And there's obviously truth to all of that. But we don't take that seriously enough to say, okay, if men are going to make a relationship work, they need radically different advice than if women are going to make a relationship work. Because, for example, women can connect very intuitively and very naturally on an emotional level, right? And if you say, I'm fine, she'll know what you really mean, right? She'll know that it's not true. Whereas if our wives say to us, I'm fine, we go, okay, good, right? And then she gets all pissed off because she's like, you should know that what I meant by I'm fine is my day at work is horrible and Susie's cousin's brother's nephew's niece, is in the hospital with a broken arm and that's on my mind. And I'm worried about the groceries. We got to repaint the garage, but we just hear I'm fine. And so nobody interprets women for men. Nobody interprets men for women. And, I really feel like I'm called to work with men. So I help men understand women so that the next time she says something like, it's not a problem, he goes, okay, oh, wait, I should catch him. She probably doesn't mean that. Oh, here's what she really means. Oh, okay, here's how to address it on an emotional level. So rather than us disconnecting in little amounts over a very, very long time that compounds and ends in divorce, I can bring us back to connection very, very quickly and build our connection in a compound way over time rather than the disconnection building in a compound way. So short answer is men and women are radically, radically different. And if you want to be married to a woman, it's very helpful to understand how they operate.
And do you think in this society right now, I mean, the women, I mean, do they really want masculine men? Because there's a piece of me that feels like women, they want masculine men, but then when they're in a relationship, they really don't want a masculine man. I mean, you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah. Here's something that'll get me in trouble, which I'm obviously fine with. The vast majority of women, whether they know it or not, want a masculine man. I read this hilarious article. It was in like New York Times or something, and it was by some very, very left-wing reporter. And the headline was something like, I hate myself because I can't stop sleeping with men in MAGA hats. Right. And so it's this kind of idea that, even if you think you don't want that, you might want it. And there are women who are naturally very masculine and they're better off with a feminine man. There are men who are naturally feminine. They're better off with a masculine woman. But the vast majority, in my opinion, and there's no data behind this, but in my experience, the vast majority of women who are masculine, it comes from trauma. They have never experienced the safety of the divine, loving masculine. Maybe their dad was not a good man. Maybe they had some exes that hurt them. There's no shortage of bad things that happen to women. And because of that, they've learned men don't provide safety to me. I have to provide safety to myself. I have to tap into my own masculine energy. I have to develop a hard masculine outer shell. And when you experience safety through your own hard external masculine shell, the idea of another man coming along and his masculinity providing safety to you is actually threatening, because then it goes, oh, so if I'm going to receive your masculine love, strength, and protection, I'm going to have to drop my own masculinity. And that's a terrifying experience. So they might beg their husband to stand up and be masculine, but when he does, they shut him down, they castrate him, they undermine him because they actually interpret it as a threat. But if you can create radical safety for her, and it's a very tricky process that's not natural to men, but when you learn, kind of how to do it, it's not that complicated. It takes a lot of patience and some time, but it's not particularly complex. When you learn how to create that radical safety, in my experience, the vast majority of women will eventually drop that hard outer masculine shell, and they will be thrilled to death that they are experiencing masculine safety for the first time. And they will borderline, worship their husbands and just be so grateful that they're with somebody that they can trust that deeply, because they, maybe for the first time in their lives, they're with somebody that they can trust. And I believe that's about the greatest gift you can give to your partner, is that emotional safety. So I do think, yeah, most women want a masculine man. They just might, their experience with men might have taught them that men are unsafe. So actually accepting it when it shows up is going to be very difficult for them.
I think I mean, just talking to so many different people. I mean, I've been doing this podcast, by the way, since 2018. Every single week,
Amazing.
I've interviewed somebody every single week for all these years, and I think you're probably close to number 300 now. And just having so many conversations with so many, men and women, and there, and of course, a lot of women that I have interviewed. They're strong in business, successful, make a lot of money. And there almost seems like there's a segment of the population of those women that basically say, I don't need a man anymore. I'm good. I'll just do my own thing. I'll get a couple of cats and I got my own stuff and I'll just be happy. And I just wonder how many of them are really that happy.
Yeah. If you ask them, they would say they're happy. But if you look at the amount of time they spend with therapists, the amount of drugs that they take, the amount of alcohol that they drink, the amount of time they spend numbing out in front of mindless TV shows, the amount of time they spend working at careers that don't provide them any meaning. As somebody who helps a lot of men admit very slowly, okay, I'm not actually that happy. I can see those people and I can say, no, you're not happy. There's nothing happy about you. You found a way to cope with your unhappiness. And I remember when I went through my own internal transformation, one of the first days where I just felt amazing. And I remember this very clearly, just going like, oh, this is what people mean when they say they're happy. I didn't understand. I thought that was something that went away when you were a kid. I didn't know you could experience that as an adult because I hadn't felt that happy since I'd been prepubescent. And so when, a fish doesn't know it's wet, when you haven't really experienced deep emotional safety and deep emotional connection, you don't know you're missing it. Right. And if you get a bit of money and you finally have, you can buy your cats the cat food you want to buy them, that's the closest thing to happiness you've ever experienced. So on a relative basis, you're like, no, I'm happy. But that doesn't mean that that's anywhere near where you could actually be. And it doesn't mean that there's actually deep, abiding joy in your life. And I think what most people mean when they're happy, when they say they're happy, is I'm not currently experiencing discomfort. And that's not the same thing as being joyful and having meaning in your life.
So explain to us what that happiness is to you and what it feels like, what it felt like that day that you experienced that, or the days that you've experienced it.
I think it's different for men and women, and it's obviously different for all men and different for all women. But I think, broadly, this might resonate more with men, but and this might seem so counterintuitive to some people, but I remember that day thinking, like, if I got hit by a bus today, I would look back at my life and be happy with it. And I'd be like, you know what? I did well. I was worthy of this life. I appreciate what I've been given. I appreciate what I've given the world. And that was never a feeling I'd had before. And I've had many, many of those days since. And that's kind of where I live now, where I very much don't want to die, and there's lots I want to accomplish, and I want to be around for my wife and my children as they grow up and grow older. But I feel good, and if something happened, I would go, this was a good experience. This was a joyful time, and I wake up appreciative of my career and appreciative of how I spend pretty much every minute of every day. I'm appreciative of my wife, even when she's having a tough time and she's maybe losing it on me a little bit. I can stand in the middle of that emotional turmoil and still feel appreciation. My kids can be unhappy or fighting, and I can still feel appreciative. It's this deep sense of meaning, and it's very hard to kind of describe unless you've experienced it. But yeah, it's just the sense that I'm happy with who I am. And as somebody who never felt that until, my early 30s, the contrast with how I used to feel is quite extreme. So I maybe am more aware of how good it feels than the average person would be who hadn't gone through, hating yourself for 15 years like I did.
Yeah, it's interesting, when you surround yourself. I was just interviewing somebody else before I got on with you as well, as a matter of fact, and we were talking about the circle, right? I mean, you put yourself in a circle of people that are good people. Like my son was with me that night when I was at Tucker in Anaheim. And I want my son to be around good people. I want him to be around good values. I want him to be around good thoughts. And it's really interesting, right? Everybody we sat with, everybody that was around us. I mean, it truly is amazing when you're around a bunch of people that have similar values that are based on moral values. I'm a Christian. I believe in certain moral values and ideas. And it's amazing how great your life could become when you start to believe certain things, and then you bring those ideas into the way you live. So kind of like what you were saying before, when it comes down to character, right? If you're around somebody with character and has certain beliefs and consistency, I mean, I know this is going to sound a little bit funny, but when you were talking about how you drank every single day and you didn't miss a day, I'm thinking in my mind, I'm thinking, you're a really consistent guy, right? I mean, you're like, I mean, whatever you do it with purpose and consistency, just like when you were a kid getting drunk. And so, but it says a lot about you. I not the drinking, but it says a lot about you in like today, right? I mean, you say you're going to do something, you do it, right? If you're going to, be there for your wife, you're going to be there for your wife. If you're going to be there for your kids, you're going to be there for your kids, right? It's a conscious choice. I mean, I look at, and I don't know if you knew this, but I actually did go through a separation a couple of years ago. And I have a 22-year-old and an 18-year-old. And I just look at it. I mean, I was that dad that I was consistent. I was there every day. I did everything else. You know what I mean? I was like, consistency, I think, for all of us is such an important piece of the puzzle of, I think in relationships. I mean, how important is consistency?
Yeah, consistency is kind of everything. And I have a bit of a different take on it than you might hear elsewhere. I love guys like, 𝐓𝐘𝐒 and David Goggins, who are like, kind of just do it. And that's important. And we all have to activate that warrior inside of us sometimes and just do it no matter how we feel. But I think there's something that's helpful for certain people is considering how that relates to what you actually care about, because you might decide that you want to go to the gym every day, but if you really do not care about being physically fit, it's just not something that matters to you. It's somewhat arbitrary to say you're going to go to the gym every day, right? You have to have, like you were saying earlier, like you have to have some value shared with yourself. And, when any idea of morality at all is under attack, and I think that's what explains a lot of the political machinations going on, is that anything that is a system of morality that has any kind of strength behind it is just being systematically attacked, right? Because people with values have a powerful no. They know when to say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to stand up against that. And so we've kind of been trained out of having values that we care about, right? The average person's idea of being moral is sorting their recycling properly, right? It's so far from values that actually matter, like truth and integrity and courage. And so if you want to be consistent in something, if you want to have a powerful no and be able to stand up and be decisive and be assertive, you actually have to know what your values are. And if you ask the average person, like, what are your highest values? They have no idea. They might say kindness or being nice. But they don't really know, is your highest value freedom, or is your highest value security? Is your highest value novelty, or is it stability? Is it being in nature? Is it connecting socially? Is it fitness? Is it intellect? Like what are the things that drive you? What are the things that really matter to you more than anything else? And if you really deeply understand those things, then you begin to align your life with them. And consistency is not that hard because it's aligned with the things that matter to you most. It's no longer arbitrary. It's connected to that deep, deep part of yourself. And the more that you can do that, the more that sticking with things is a kind of a natural extension of who you are, because you're not just imposing somebody else's idea of what you're supposed to do on yourself. You're doing the things that matter to you, which is, I think, really what makes the difference.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, consistency is, I mean, I've been training and teaching people for 28 years now. And talking about the success aspect or success in business, or somebody that's, that wants to do well. I've seen it where so many really, really talented, great people could do so much better in their life if they just would make a commitment to something.
Mhm.
And I think, and maybe you could give your thoughts on this, but kind of in the society that we live in today, we have so many choices, right? Almost an infinite, amount of choices that nobody wants to commit anymore. Like, because if it just doesn't work out, well, I'll just swipe left again and find somebody else. And it's almost like a never ending story for so many people out there. What are your thoughts on that, the dating culture and kind of the swiping culture that we're in today?
Yeah, well, we don't value commitment. We don't value trusting your own word. We value really novelty, right? And you can look at art or architecture as an example. If you build a building, or you create a piece of art that's stunningly beautiful in a traditional sense, nobody really cares. They want to see something new, right? Even if you're smearing feces on a blank canvas, while wearing a diaper, it's like, okay, well, that's new, right? That's what we're taught to value as a society. And we're also taught, do what makes you happy. You have to be you, right? Not go through that incredibly painful and, dark process of actually figuring out who you really are. But be you means do what you feel like. And anything that's worth doing, there's going to be many moments where you don't feel like doing it. And so if you've trained yourself and you've been trained by society to do what you feel like doing in the moment, and that's the highest calling, and that's how you find happiness, you're going to always jump around, because again, there's going to be moments, no matter what you're doing, and no matter how much you might love the outcome you're aiming at, there's going to be lots of times along the way where you're like, this is boring, this is crappy, this feels like failure. And really what defines success in my mind, and successful people, is who can fail the longest, like who can tolerate the most failure. And the man who can fail the longest without giving up is the man who succeeds. And that's not what we're taught. We're kind of taught the opposite. Well, it's not working out for you, right? Try something different, try something new. It's a different diet, it's a different career. And sometimes that obviously is the answer. Like, I've tried different diets, I've tried different careers, but you have to get really clear internally. Like, am I quitting because I don't feel like doing this? Or am I quitting because this isn't what my path should be, and I'm doing something that's against my nature? And I think a really big part of this is learning to trust your own word. And I'm a smart person, but I'm also a very slow learner, and pain is what teaches me lessons. And I've said I'm going to do things and then betrayed myself and then suffered the consequences of that so many times, that I've learned that when I say I'm going to do something, even if it sucks to complete the thing that I said I was going to do, that feels better than the pain of betraying myself. And when you do betray yourself, it's amazing how that lack of trust that you feel in yourself kind of ripples out into your life, and you trust people less, and they trust you less, and less opportunities come your way. But it's much easier to just give yourself an excuse and move on, and not look at that deep, dark part of yourself that just wanted to quit because it was hard, and just wanted to quit because I failed before and it felt bad, and I don't like feeling bad. It's much easier to just kind of ignore that, watch Netflix, eat ice cream, drink alcohol, and move on. But if you can listen to that little voice inside that goes, no, you should keep going, you're just quitting because it sucks right now, watch your life change, and watch it change like magically in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, when you commit to something and you follow through on it, you also feel better about yourself. It's like you kind of almost have like a deeper sense of confidence for yourself, in yourself, because you've actually done something and you followed through. And the harder it is, I think the more appreciation that you have for those moments, and the appreciation that you have for yourself, to be able to kind of like almost like pat yourself on the back and say, man, I'm proud of you. I mean, I've said many times, I'm so glad I didn't quit like everybody else. Everybody in my industry, 99% of them throughout all my years, 28 years in the same company, same business, 28 years, most people quit. Most people didn't follow through on their commitments. And I kind of feel sorry for them, because The end result could have been so much better for most of them. And you're right. Some of them, it's just not, they're not cut out for it. And that's okay. I mean, nothing's for everybody, but I do feel like there was so many people, and the same goes through with relationships, right? I mean, people give up way too soon. I mean, I was with the same woman for 30 years. So it was a very, very long time, very, very difficult situation. But I really feel like, you do the best you can in any situation. You do the best you can to stay committed. And I was very, very committed throughout the process. And so has feminism gone too far, do you think?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's not a whole lot of people that disagree with the idea that women should have equal rights and equal opportunities to men. But we left that idea in the dust a very, very long time ago. We're way, way past that. And I actually think the biggest problem with feminism isn't even what it's done to men. It's what it's done to women, because feminism did not teach women how to be incredible, beautiful, loving, strong, empowered women. It said you can be like men. You can do what men do. And so all of these women for decades now have been told that the path to happiness is to be like men and to do the things that men do. And sorry to break it to you, but I still say sorry like a Canadian. My kids don't, funny enough. But yeah, sorry to break it to you, but it's a tougher road for women to do the things that men do in many ways. And I don't just mean bricklaying. I know some incredible, very, very famous, very, very high-performing women who I have an insane amount of respect for, and I consider very, very dear friends of mine, people that I really love. But the average woman who wants to try to outcompete men in the office, biologically, their system is not set up for it, right? The places in their body, for example, that they produce testosterone, and the amount of testosterone they need to produce to compete with men who naturally have 20 times more than you, your system is going to burn out. You're going to be fried. You're going to start to psychologically malfunction. Your personal life is going to suffer. It's a very rare woman who can compete with the men at the top of a corporate structure. It's a very rare man that can compete with those men, like 1 in 100,000, right? And so none of these systems that we have in the workforce, for example, are set up for women and their natural cycle and their monthly cycle and their hormonal cycle and their testosterone. Like, it's not set up for that. And so just telling women, hey, you can do what men can do. I wouldn't be happy trying to be a really high performing woman, right? Because that's not what I am. And luckily there's kind of this counter movement now where there's a lot of women, a lot of like online coaches, for example, who are teaching women what it's like to actually be a high performing, empowered woman. And it's very different than what it's like to be a high-powered, high-performing man. And so I think feminism, as much as it's very anti-male in so many ways, I think it did a much greater disservice to women than it did to men.
Well, it's very interesting that you bring up testosterone and all these, because I mean, let's be honest. I mean, women, they have children, and when they have children, they're in their mind, they might be working. A guy might be able to shut it off, saying, hey, look, my wife's taking care of the kids are safe, kids are okay, everything's taken care of at my home. A woman, maybe even a single woman, she still has the thoughts of her kids at home, and maybe the guilt that is associated with kids at home and things like that. So like I have a lot of really successful women that work in my business, and the truth is, I've seen it a million times that their performance will suffer because they're totally focused on their home, which I don't criticize them at all for that. That's, what they're
no kidding.
That's inside of their DNA,
and how crazy is it that we think, and that a lot of people think, that if a woman cares about her family more than her career, it's somehow a betrayal of her gender. Like how backwards are our values, that it's bad to care more about your kids than your career, by and large, for a company that will fire you and you'll be remembered as an employee number in an HR database, and that's it. Yeah, but women have a different type of awareness than men, right? Men have kind of single focus, women have diffuse awareness. And there's a reason for that, right? There's a great book called Understanding Women by Alison Armstrong that kind of goes through this in detail. An amazing book that I recommend every married man or every man who wants to be married go out immediately and listen to. It's audiobook only. Understanding Women, Unwrapping the Paradox or something, but Understanding Women by Alison Armstrong, you'll find it. But men were historically hunters, right? And so that means you go out and you find something with 4 legs and hooves and you bring it back for people to eat. And that's it. That's one thing you need to do and nothing else matters. And you tune everything else out. If you're a woman who's more likely to be gathering, you're carrying an infant, attending to that infant's needs while looking for berries, making sure they're ripe, making sure they're not poisonous, making sure there's not a monster hiding in it, tracking the weather to make sure you can get back to the cave on time, looking for the toddler and the 6-year-old, making sure they're okay, talking to the other women in the tribe. Like there's a million things you have to be tracking all at the same time, right? So women do have diffuse awareness. And it's really important for men to know this because men will often get offended if like their wife is thinking about something else during sex and they can tell she's not there. And it's like, it's not because you're not Don Juan, super attractive, jacked, handsome man. It's because that's how women's minds are. If you want her to not think about the kids during sex, make sure she's not near the kids during sex. Like make sure you're at a hotel in a different part of town or a different city, right? Like she has to be that far away because of that diffuse awareness. So it's very, very different. And since we don't recognize these differences between men and women, and we pretend that men and women are the same, we're setting everybody up for failure, but I think especially women. And there is this movement now where women are going, okay, how can I balance having a career and having children, and having, a fulfilling life and being fit and having a social life and a fun life. But this idea that women can have it all, and this is not a quote from me, this is a quote from many, many women who I respect who work in the performance space who've said this, you cannot have it all. Men also can't have it all, right? My career is my purpose in life and it takes time away from my family. Now I've set it up very, very intentionally in a way where I get to spend a lot of time with my family. But if I had a career that was like a basic 9 to 5, it would be much easier for me to come home, turn off my brain, just be with my family. So my purpose does take away from my family, and I'm aware of that. Like there are trade-offs you have to make, and lying to people and saying, no, you can have a high-performing career and be there for your kids as much as you want and maintain a perfect body and maintain a really, thriving social life. No, you can't. Very few human beings on earth can do that. None that I've met. And certainly not the average person or the average woman. So that's a lie. Admit it's a lie, and then say, okay, in light of now living in reality, how do I want to structure my remaining years on earth so that I receive the maximum fulfillment, the maximum meaning, the maximum love out of those years that I have left?
I mean, and it's the, when you really break it down, it's so much of the media has put this in women's minds. I mean, they make them feel guilty if they're not strong and independent and disrespecting their husbands. I mean, I think, look, I mean, that, what I've heard from so many people that I've talked to, one of the biggest challenges is the lack of respect. When you do have a man that goes out there and does, get the lion or get the buffalo or whatever, bringing back the food for the family and taking care of the family and wanting to make sure that they're okay, wanting to, protecting them, providing for them. And then you have a woman that really doesn't respect those efforts. Could that be a major challenge in a relationship?
Yeah, if a man is not respected in his relationship, it's absolutely devastating, and it crushes his spirit, and he ends up living like a half-life. There's nothing good about that, and unfortunately, there's so many men who their response to not being respected in the relationship is, well, I'm going to do more. I'm going to earn more money. I'm going to do more tasks around the house. I'm going to ask her to give me more lists of things that I can do. And then they get a list of 100 things. They go and do those 100 things. And her response is, you kind of got one of them a little bit wrong. And that's it, right? And he's thinking, I was talking to a client yesterday, the day before, and his wife is, very upset about him, very upset at him for how he's been in the relationship. And he goes, for the last 20 years, I've enjoyed 4 days at the office, and every single other day has been misery, but I want to provide for my family. And I go through this misery every single day except for 4 for the last 20 years. And when I get home, nothing's good enough. And I'm not trying, and I'm not a good provider. And that's all that I get told. And it's devastating. It's horrible. It's brutal. And I could whine about that. You could say, I wish it was different. You could go get gay married and avoid that problem altogether. There's lots of options out there. But if you want to be married to a woman, you better learn why things function that way. And a woman whose needs are not being met is not going to meet your needs. And again, this kind of goes back to testosterone. Testosterone is not really mood dependent. If you're in a bad mood, you still have testosterone, you're still willing to fight. You can be in the worst fight of your life with your wife, but if somebody breaks through your front door, you're going to go to lay down your life in a second. Doesn't matter if you're furious at her, right? But women are very, very different. If their needs aren't being met, if they're not emotionally whole and emotionally well placed, they're not able to share emotional well-being, right? Testosterone is driven at results. Estrogen is driven at social well-being and social connection. And so if she's not in a good place emotionally, she's not going to be able to share that with you and with the family. So if you want your wife to recognize the sacrifices that you make, don't make more sacrifices. Get her in a good, emotionally safe, connected place. Meet her needs. Take the time to actually figure out, what does she need? And a simple way to think about it is she needs to be safe. And emotional safety is something that men don't care about in the same way. But if you want to, you can break it down into 3 buckets. She needs to feel seen, she needs to feel supported, and she needs to feel special. And if any one of those 3 things is missing, she's not going to feel safe, and you're not going to get an appreciative, loving, respectful wife. So next time she complains about the dishes and you go, well, I've actually done the dishes 74% of the time over the last month because I've been tracking it because I knew you were going to say this, it's not going to help anything, right? It's not about the dishes. It's that she doesn't feel emotionally supported, right? Same thing for special. She says, why are you, hitting on the waitress? And you go, I didn't even notice who the waitress is. And you start defending yourself, trying to convince her she's wrong. It doesn't get anywhere. She gets madder. She slams the door. You're not getting laid that night. It's awful, right? She's not feeling special in that moment. Make her feel special, compliment her, build her up. And then same for seen. If she always complains, you don't buy me the right gifts, whatever, she doesn't feel like you understand her. Doesn't feel like you get her, like you hear her, like she's seen. And so you have to make her feel seen, which means you got to give her time to circle around the issue for 45 minutes until she finally says all these random unrelated details and then finally gets the thing that actually matters. And then she feels understood by you because you let her talk long enough for her to figure out what she's feeling, right? And if you do those things, you make her feel special, seen, and supported, she will feel safe. And from that place of safety, when her needs are being met, she feels protected, she feels fended for, she feels like she has a strong, loving, patient man with her. Then you can do one task on the list of 100, and she's going to brag to all of her friends about what an amazing man you are and how good of a job you do taking care of her, right? Just like in sex, she needs to come first, right? If you meet her needs, she will then meet your needs. And it's not the same for men and women. You can have an amazing, incredible wife who does everything for her husband, and he might just completely take her for granted and, go off and do things he shouldn't be doing. But if you're meeting her emotional needs and you're making her feel safe in the relationship and connected, she doesn't need to take a coaching program. She doesn't need to read a book. She will know how to make you happy. She will know how to meet your needs. It's innate to her. She has intuition, the same intuition that she has where she knows what her kids needs before you do. She will know what you need before you do, and she will meet your needs without you having to ask her. But if her needs aren't met and you're trying to tell her to meet your needs, good fucking luck. It's not going to happen.
Wow. Good stuff, man. So it sounds to me like it's compromise. It's compromise, and it's letting things go. It's being really aware of what's going on behind how she's really feeling. Not the way she's saying she's feeling, but actually behind the curtain of what she's really feeling. Am I close here?
Yeah. So men really act from a place of facts, and that's what matters to us. And women act from a place of feelings, and that's what matters to them. And this is another really terrible thing about the feminist movement is they try to get women to act from a fact place, which means so many women have lost touch with their magical emotional intuition, the thing that men just really can't do at the same level. And what is really women's greatest incredible gift to the world, and something that makes women more powerful than men in so many ways. But women have kind of cut that part of themselves off. They've closed their heart and they try to live from their head. But that's not where they reside. So when you get into a fight with your wife, the dishes, and she's saying you never do the dishes, but you can come back and say, with honesty, I've actually done the dishes every single time in the last month. You haven't done them once. And you expect her to go, okay, that's a good point. I'll calm down. And instead she gets even angrier and even more upset. And then the man ends up thinking like, I'm married to a narcissist who's crazy and unappreciative, and she's just the absolute worst, and I can't work with her. Like, why? I can't solve this relationship. But what was actually happening is the dishes were just some random fact that she grabbed to try to get you to see her feelings. And since women aren't being taught how to communicate from their feelings, and they think that men are like women, we're just going to recognize it. We're not. We're kind of communicating like this, and there's not even a chance for compromise, right? But if you say, okay, the dishes actually mean she's feeling unsupported, I'm going to address it on that level. I'm going to say, hey, I'm sensing you're really overwhelmed right now and you could use some help, right? What can I do to support you right now? Then all of a sudden her whole body language will change, everything shifts, because it was never about the dishes, right? But for men, we're so focused on the facts. Like if we're roommates and I tell you, you got to do the dishes more, that's exactly what I mean, and there's no more to it, right? If your wife tells you you got to do the dishes more, there's a novel behind that. And again, if you want to be married to a woman, you better understand how they communicate and learn to communicate in that way. Learn to see past the facts, dodge all of the facts that she throws at you, and address the underlying emotional reality that she's experiencing. Because when you do that, she'll actually get better at communicating logically and making her thoughts or making her feelings into explicit thoughts that she can communicate to you in a way that you actually understand them. But again, you have to learn how to do that first, and she's going to learn how to do that after, because until she's feeling safe and connected, she's going to be kind of panicking her feelings at you instead of articulating them in a way that the average man can actually hear.
So is this kind of like when you're talking about, her feelings are everywhere and things are a little bit chaotic and she's complaining and whining about things and things like that? I mean, this is kind of what you're talking about. We as men have to say, hang on, what's the real issue? It ain't that. 9 times out of 10, it ain't going to be that situation. Yeah. It's going to be something else underlining. And if we can just pause and say, okay, what is that? Do the dang dishes. Who cares? Do the dishes, make her happy. And then say, honey, is there anything else that I can help you with? Or
you nailed
is that kind of what
things.
You're saying?
Yeah, you nailed a couple of things, because 9 times out of 10 is right, because 1 time out of 10, it actually will be the dishes, right?
Right.
But even if it's not actually the dishes, because she has that diffuse awareness, she might not be able to have that conversation with you until the dishes are done, because she's going to have this voice in her head going, the dishes aren't done, the dishes aren't done, the dishes aren't done, and she can't pay attention, right? So do the freaking dishes, who cares? And then have that conversation with her. And the more that you learn how to do that and meet her on that emotional level, the more she goes, oh, okay, this is a man that I can actually trust to meet my needs. He wants to hear what I'm saying. He wants to hear what's underneath my feelings. And so I don't have to communicate it to him in this maybe toxic or overbearing way, because I actually trust that he'll listen. So I can just go to him and say, hey, I really need your help. And this is what this is what would really mean a lot to me, because she trusts that you're actually going to hear her. And this goes back to, men and women not really knowing the roles we're meant to play in relationship. Again, because there's kind of like this idea that if you even say men and women play different roles in a relationship, you're somehow evil. And every relationship should be 50-50. You want a boring, neutral, sexless relationship, go 50-50 on everything. Try that and see how it works. But if you want a really exciting, amazing, meaningful, beautiful relationship, you have to have that polarity. There's no attraction between 2 north ends of a magnet, right? It's the north and the south end that attract, right? And so one of the things that men need to understand is that our role in relationship, one of the gifts we offer to women is that we can be more emotionally stable. Now, we're not as in touch with our feelings. We can't live in that world with the same type of effect that women can. They're much better at than us, but we can be more emotionally stable on average. Just looking at your hormone profile through the month, this is kind of what men's testosterone levels look like. Women's hormones, pick the hormone, it's like this through the month, right? Like they live in a very different emotional world. So if you can be emotionally resilient in a relationship, that's a gift to her, right? So the next time your wife comes at you and she's spazzing and losing it because you didn't do the dishes, don't do what all men do, which is defend yourself, feel insecure, attack her back, tell her, well, you didn't do the laundry, and but I do this with the car. And it's like, it's not a factual argument. And even if you win the factual argument, you still lose, right? But you can give her a gift in that moment. And the gift is, can you be calm in the middle of her storm? And can you show her through that, hey, I'm stronger than the pull of your emotions. I'm stronger than your emotional volatility, because if you're not stronger than her emotional storm, you can't offer her any rest from it. You can't offer her a place of refuge, right? If her emotional storm destabilizes you and knocks you over, now you're both in a storm, and that's not going to make anything better, right? But if she learns that he's actually a safe place for me to have a bit of a temper tantrum sometimes and to kind of lose it, and when I do that, he just kind of smiles at me and wraps his arms around me and tells me he loves me, and then offers to go do the dishes and tells me to go to my room and watch that crappy TV show that I like because it seems like I need a break, and that's the way he responds to me, like, just watch what happens to your sex life. And maybe more importantly, watch what happens to her over time. Watch those storms become less frequent, become less intense, and watch her soften into a place where she's really at rest inside of herself. And when something goes wrong, it's no longer a big explosion, because she goes, well, this feels like a lot, but I know in my home is a man who's going to be with me for the rest of my life, who's not going to react to this, who's not going to be threatened by this, who can be calm and show me, this guiding light of the lighthouse during the storm, and he can guide me to land. And that will make her go, okay, I can handle what I'm feeling, and I can present it in a calm way. Because, it's almost like my daughter, a while back, I was in the basement and I heard like this clatter upstairs. And then my daughter, who was like 4 or 5 at the time, just screamed, "Daddy, why did you make me spill the milk?" Right? And my response wasn't to run upstairs and start correcting her and telling her she's wrong. And don't you understand? I'm like, I just wrapped my arms around her and said, "It's okay, baby. It's just milk. Like, I'll clean it up. Don't worry. You can help me. We'll do it together. It's all good." And then what did she say after? "Well, Daddy, I know you didn't spill the milk. And I know it was me." Right? But if I had argued with her, it wasn't going to get anywhere. Right? But that's because she's 5 years old and I wasn't threatened by her. But my wife, who is half Israeli, half Irish, she can be very threatening. And I can very easily be triggered by her. So I have to be really careful when I'm around her and recognize, oh, the little girl in her is overwhelmed right now. She's feeling angry. She's feeling insecure. She had a bad day. Something's going on in her social world or with her body that she doesn't like. And she needs a safe place to take it out. So just like my daughter, she's taking it out on me. And can I sit in the middle of that, in the middle of my insecurities, in the middle of my desire to lash out at her and to tell her all the things that she's done wrong? And can I just let her say her piece, smile at her, tell her I love her, tell her it's going to be okay, go have a glass of wine, I'll take care of this. And then get the next 3 weeks after that an insanely connected, beautiful, loving, soft, nurturing, respectful wife.
Wow. Dude, you're gonna change a lot of people's lives with this, man. I mean, this is powerful shit. I'm not kidding, man. I've had a lot of
Thank you.
Relationship coaches. I've had a lot of people that I've had conversations with. This is powerful stuff. And I know it, and I know what people are thinking right now as they're watching. They're like, well, that's just common sense, but it's really not. No. It's not. We're not raised. Nobody taught me these things as I was growing up, or I was any time during my marriage. I mean, 22 years married, 30 years with the same person. I mean, nobody ever explained these things to me. And I think that this is some like boom, like your mind is going to be blown if you do these things in your relationship. This is unbelievable. Okay, last question, because I'm curious, and I didn't ask it before. What were some of the real issues that you had in your marriage? Like, what was the main issue on where, you got triggered and you went through some shit? I know you did. So explain to us what that was with as much detail as you can, because I'm curious as heck.
Yeah. I mean, all of them, like pretty much all of the things we've mentioned. So let me try to answer that without just repeating all the things I've already said. I thought everything was her fault. I thought she was being unappreciative. And I was right on some level, right? Because I knew I was doing my very best. I knew I was working as hard as I possibly could. I'd work all day and then I'd get home and I'd take care of the kids and I'd try to clean the house for her and I'd give her a break. And I was like, all I do all the time is work to make you happy, and you are never happy. You're always angry with me. You're always upset. You always make me feel like I'm not good enough. I'm not attractive enough. I was jealous. I tried to control her. I tried to make her obey me because I felt weak and insecure. And if she obeyed me, I would feel powerful and I'd feel better about myself and I'd feel confident. I undermined her. I made her feel like she wasn't worthy of me because I felt like that's how she was treating me. I made all the mistakes that all of my clients make. I made all the mistakes that I talked about today. But again, like you were saying, none of this was because I wanted to hurt her or I didn't care about her. And that's what women always think it's because we don't love them, right? Because again, women don't understand men any better than we understand them. It's because we don't get that women are different. I didn't get that she didn't understand I was doing all of this for her. Like, how could you think that I enjoy doing all these things and barely sleeping and working all the time? Like, I'm obviously doing this for you, but since her needs weren't being met emotionally and she didn't feel loved, all of that sacrifice I was making was pretty much irrelevant. It didn't connect for her. And again, it would be nice if women are different. But again, if you have a problem with that, go get gay married. That's your only option, right? If you want to be married to a woman, that's how women are, right? So accept the rules of the game, play by them, meet her needs emotionally, and watch it. You will get the wife you want. And that's what happened with me is all of these things that I thought were her character flaws or her upbringing or her personality. When I changed, she changed in response 100%. And she is a radically different wife than she is. And she didn't see any coaches. She didn't see any therapists. She didn't do anything. It was me who made the changes, and she changed in response to all of them. And I've seen this with my clients over and over again. If you want her to make changes and you're pressuring her to see a therapist, to address her trauma, to talk about things that happened to her, women hate pressure. She will not do it. Every time you try to convince her, she will just automatically produce a counter argument, and she will get more and more set that she's not going to do that thing. Men grow through pressure. Women grow through nurture, right? You want her to go to the gym, tell her how fit and beautiful she looks. Don't tell her like you would your buddy, dude, you're looking like a fat ass. You got to hit the gym, right? Has the opposite effect with women. So yeah, I did everything wrong, but it wasn't because I didn't love her. It wasn't because I wasn't willing to put in the work. It wasn't because I wasn't committed. And she thought that was all. She thought none of those things were true. She thought I didn't love her and I wasn't committed and I wasn't willing to put in the work, even though there's a lot of facts to contradict that. It was because nobody ever taught us this, right? Our parents' generation, and I know you said you were with the same woman for 30 years, so you must be older than you look, but we're roughly the same age.
Yeah.
And our dads didn't know any of this, right? And our moms didn't know any of this. And a lot of our parents didn't have really good polar masculine feminine relationships. They had kind of that more neutral relationship. There's a lot of resentment in our parents' generations, a lot of kind of physically present but emotionally absent dads. They were home, they may have been at the game, but you couldn't talk to them about what you're going through, hard times. You couldn't ask them for guidance. So but then again, our dads did better than their dads did, right? So they improved upon the situation they were giving. It's our duty to improve upon the situation that we were given. Same for our sons. I hope he improves on what I give him. But the bottom line is like nobody taught us any of this. And so if you're going to start a business, if you're going to go into a career, education is always the first part of it. And yet for a marriage, there's zero education, zero prep, zero education. And so we're thrown into this environment, and when we learn we need to get some education and figure out how this works is when everything starts falling apart. And the worst part of that is men don't notice when things are falling apart. So what happens all the time is they wake up and she's gone, and he goes, I knew things weren't like amazing, but I had no idea this is where we are. And she goes, well, that's just proof you didn't love me, because for the last 5 years I've been telling you that this isn't working. And she has. But she's been telling him in the way that women tell, right? Which is like little subtle comments here and there that she thinks you're going to understand because her girlfriends would understand. But you don't understand. You think it's just a little comment. You don't even remember what she said. And she thinks you've been ignoring her because you don't love her. So she goes, how could he not know there's a problem? This is the most obvious thing in the world, right? So if you're in a situation like that where you're like, hey, I'm not sure if our marriage is in a good place, like it's probably worse than you think it is. And she's probably not effectively communicating that to you, and she probably won't. So you better learn this stuff. And I think, if you want to work with me, obviously, I think that's the best option you have. But if you're not ready for that, buy the book. It's like $11, Understanding Women by Alison Armstrong. It's an audiobook. That book will have 3 or 4 gut punch moments where you're squirming in your chair because you're going, I can't believe I fucked things up this badly. It's so obvious. Why did nobody ever explain this to me? But you'll be so well equipped to have a relationship with a female if you just listen to that book and do nothing else. Again, if you want to go deeper, give me a call, reach out to me. But if you want to start there, like listen to that damn book and watch your relationship change.
I love it, man. Well, I could do this for another 3 hours, man. Matt, you have been absolutely you know what I feel right now? I feel like I am Daniel Alonzo 2.0 right now.
Yes,
okay?
Sir.
Like that is how I feel. And I just hope, I'm going to be a forever follower of you, man. I'm going to promote you. I'm going to tell everybody about you. If you are my audience, right, you're listening, you're watching on YouTube, whatever, you need to go out and get connected with Matt. And I don't care if you're in a bad relationship, if your relationship is perfect. I think you need to reach out, have a conversation, keep diving deep, learning and getting better, because some of this stuff was absolutely, this was mind blowing today. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, Matt. in all the value that you're bringing to the world right now. You're making a difference, and you're going to change, the skyline of America, man. And of course the world, man, Canada, and ultimately the world, man. So God bless you for what you do and what you're doing right now. And your wisdom is highly taken today. You've made a big difference in a lot of people's lives. So thank you for that. But how do we reach out to you? How do we get in touch? Because I know my audience, they're going to be texting you, blowing you up. They're going to say, what's up? They're going to say, thanks for coming on Wealth on the Beach podcast with Daniel Alonzo. They're going to love you, man. So you're going to get a lot of new followers from this, buddy.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate your kind words so much. This is my life's passion. I love what I do so much. And so to hear that from you really does absolutely mean the world to me. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you for doing what you do and allowing me a chance to speak to new people and to get in front of a new audience. So my deep gratitude to you. Best place to get a hold of me is Instagram. You can shoot me a message at _sovereign_man. You can also go to sovereignmancoaching.com. And you can see what we have to offer there. But yeah, I'm most active on Instagram. We're just getting YouTube going again at the _sovereign_man. But Instagram's the place where I'm most active.
Love it, man. Well, let's blow up your YouTube channel. Let's get everybody out there to watch, but connect with Matt, please. If you're watching, listening, if you're in a relationship that you're having some difficulties, or you're not having some difficulties, man, go get help, And I think, like, for me personally, I'm going to share this video with my son. He's in a, relationship with a girlfriend. I'm going to share this with him. I'm going to share this with, with my daughter's boyfriend. I'm going to share this with him. I'm going to make sure that everybody knows what's going on, because, us as men, we got to know some shit, man. Like, we got to grow. We got to get better. We got to all become the best versions of ourselves. And we got to stop being so egotistical and thinking that we know it all, because we don't know it all. And there are things that are just, you just got to learn, and you just got to get better. So with that said, everybody continue to dream bigger than ever. Get after it. You got to get after it. You got to make better choices. Get after it. But most importantly, do it now. God bless you. We'll see you at the top.